Kinsey Schofield here. Welcome to Crown and Conflict, a series dedicated to dissecting the most riveting Windsor's the defining book on Meghan Markle's very brief history as a working royal. Revenge is a forensic assessment of Meghan's character and her
trouble finding a lady to marry. Harry was desperate to marry. Harry was desperate to have love, to marry, have children. Harry was desperate to replicate what...
In 1994, Meghan Markle vanished, not from the world, but from her own story. One missing year, no records, no photos, no trace. When palace investigators tried to verify her background, they hit something strange. Sealed files, missing witnesses, dead ends. That silence wasn't accidental. It was constructed. And the people who built it knew exactly what they were protecting. Because if the truth about that year ever surfaces, it could destroy more than Meghan's image. It could rewrite the royal family's entire story.
Somewhere where she'd appear cheap and give it gratis. And this year, she is desperate to be seen.
Yeah.
And that's why.
Looking at the pattern reveals something fascinating. While Meghan claims that she was backpacking through Europe, persistent rumors place her not in Paris or Rome, but in Chicago, specifically connected to a family that couldn't be more different from her Hollywood ambitions, the Giulianos.
An awful lot. And there are other people who've had relationships like that, and they have worked.
The Giuliano family represents old-school Italian-American values. Traditional, fiercely private, with deep roots in their Chicago neighborhood. According to sources familiar with the situation, they're the kind of family where loyalty isn't just expected. It's enforced through generations of silence about family matters. What's particularly interesting is how this family's values would clash violently with everything Meghan represented. Ambition over tradition, fame over family, individual achievement over collective loyalty.
Sir pivot, because that's what I was like, oh my God, oh no. I mean, they're spokespeople.
Absolutely. I mean, the moment they went there and allowed themselves to be photographed, and I thought, well, how much are they being paid for this? And quite clearly...
Notice the pattern that emerges when you examine the timeline. In early 1994, Meghan graduates from high school with clear plans for Northwestern University. By late 1994, she's supposedly traveling through Europe, yet no one can produce a single piece of evidence. By 1995, whispers begin circulating in certain Chicago circles about a Giuliano family matter that requires careful handling. Then suddenly, Meghan appears at Northwestern as if nothing happened, her gap year explained away with vague references to finding herself.
The media think that Harry could get any woman he wanted. Well, he might have been able to initially get a girl into bed once or twice.
This wasn't the first time we've seen this pattern with Meghan. Throughout her life, there have been relationships and connections that simply vanish from her narrative when they no longer serve her image. Her first husband, Trevor Engelson, became a footnote. Her father, who funded her education and supported her dreams, was erased from her royal wedding. But this earlier erasure, this missing year, might be the template for all that followed.
It's Disney today and some sort of butter spread tomorrow. I mean, that's the trajectory they're on. But they're going to have to earn some money.
The name that keeps surfacing in connection with this period is Joe Giuliano. Multiple sources suggest that what started as a teenage romance escalated into something far more serious. A secret marriage that would have been completely at odds with Meghan's carefully planned future. Consider what this would mean for an ambitious young woman with dreams of Hollywood. A teenage marriage to someone from a traditional Italian-American family wouldn't just be inconvenient. It would be a potential career killer in image-conscious Hollywood.
Mark in ways that have turned out to be positive. But, I mean, you have to be a pretty intelligent, sort of very...
What makes this story particularly compelling is the legal trail, or rather, the suspicious absence of one. Teenage marriages aren't uncommon, and their dissolutions are typically straightforward legal matters. In most cases, you can walk into any county courthouse and pull up annulment records from decades past. They're public documents filed away with thousands of other routine legal proceedings.
It's a serious relationship before Meghan, which was Cressida Bonas. In Spare, Harry makes out...
But here's where the Meghan narrative takes an unusual turn. Reports suggest that if there was an annulment, it wasn't just filed, it was sealed. Legal experts familiar with family law point out that sealing an annulment is highly unusual unless there are specific circumstances. Minors are involved, there's potential for harm, or both parties have compelling reasons to keep the details private. According to courthouse sources, the process of sealing such records requires more than just a standard request. It requires justification, often legal representation, and sometimes judicial approval. The question becomes, what would necessitate such extraordinary measures for what should have been a simple teenage mistake? The timing raises even more questions. By mid-1995, sources suggest there were whispers in the Giuliano family circle about a pregnancy. This aligns suspiciously with the period when Meghan would have been preparing to start at Northwestern. One source familiar with the family indicated that there was a sudden need for privacy and discretion around this time, with family members being reminded that some things stay in the family. What's particularly telling is the institutional response to queries about this period. When Vanity Fair fact, the timing raises even more questions. By mid-1995, sources suggest there were whispers in the Giuliano family circle about a pregnancy. This aligns suspiciously with the period when Meghan would have been preparing to start at Northwestern. One source familiar with the family indicated that there was a sudden need for privacy and discretion around this time, with family members being reminded that some things stay in the family. Hackers attempted to verify stories from Meghan's youth for their 2017 profile. They reportedly hit unusual roadblocks when investigating the 1994 to 1995 timeframe. Sources familiar with the magazine's research process indicated that typically responsive sources suddenly became unavailable when questions touched on this specific period. When Meghan met Prince Harry, her missing year transformed from a personal curiosity into a potential royal crisis. The British monarchy has survived countless scandals, from abdications to affairs, but they've all followed a predictable pattern: revelation, damage control, eventual acceptance. What the palace fears most isn't scandal, it's the unknown, the hidden explosive that could detonate without warning. Palace sources suggest that during the standard vetting process for Harry's girlfriend, the 1994 to 1995 gap raised immediate red flags. This wasn't just about propriety or reputation. This was about national security. Every person who enters the royal family undergoes extensive background checks. These aren't simple credit reports. They're comprehensive investigations designed to uncover any potential vulnerability that could be exploited by foreign powers, blackmailers, or hostile media. What reportedly concerned palace officials wasn't just the missing year itself, but the apparent effort to keep it hidden. One senior courtier, speaking on condition of anonymity, suggested that transparency would have resolved everything, but the walls of silence suggested something worth protecting. The palace had learned hard lessons from previous oversights. Diana's secret recordings, Sarah Ferguson's financial entanglements, even Prince Andrew's associations, all were failures of proper vetting or acknowledgement. With Meghan, they faced a choice: demand full disclosure and risk losing Harry, or accept the unknown and hope it remained buried. Looking back, the signs were there in how the palace handled Meghan's biography. Notice how quickly her official royal biography glossed over her pre-university years. Compare that to Kate Middleton's biography, which included detailed information about her gap year activities, complete with locations and timeframes. The contrast is striking. What palace officials perhaps didn't fully appreciate was how the internet age would transform this cold case into an active investigation. Once Meghan became a global figure, her missing year became a crowdsourced mystery. Forums on Reddit, Facebook groups, and eventually TikTok turned into digital detective agencies, with thousands of amateur investigators poring over yearbooks, graduation photos, and public records. The pattern of investigation followed a predictable escalation. First came the genealogy enthusiasts, mapping out family connections and finding the Giuliano link through Meghan's mother's side. Then came the legal researchers, discovering the curious absence of records that should have been public. Finally, the social media detectives began connecting dots that traditional media wouldn't touch. One particularly telling development came when a TikTok user claimed to have found a Giuliano family member willing to discuss the period. The video was deleted within hours, but screenshots clicking back, the signs were there in how the palace handled Meghan's biography. Notice how quickly her official royal biography glossed over her pre-university years. Compare that to Kate Middleton's biography, which included detailed information about her gap year activities, complete with locations and timeframes. The contrast is striking. What palace officials perhaps didn't fully appreciate was how the internet age would transform this cold case into an active investigation. Once Meghan became a global figure, her missing year became a crowdsourced mystery. Forums on Reddit, Facebook groups, and eventually TikTok turned into digital detective agencies, with thousands of amateur investigators poring over yearbooks, graduation photos, and public records. circulated showing what appeared to be family photographs from 1994 to 1995. While their authenticity couldn't be verified, the speed of their disappearance raised eyebrows. What's fascinating is how Meghan's team has handled these investigations. Rather than addressing them directly, which would give them legitimacy, or ignoring them completely, which would allow them to flourish unchecked, they've employed a strategy of selective engagement. Certain researchers report receiving cease and desist letters, while others operate freely. The pattern suggests a careful calculation about which threads pose real threats. Here's where the missing year becomes more than just historical curiosity. It strikes at the heart of Meghan's entire public persona. She's built her brand on authenticity, on speaking her truth, on breaking free from institutional silence. The Oprah interview, the Netflix series, the podcast all positioned her as someone brave enough to tell uncomfortable truths about one of the world's most powerful institutions. But if she's concealing something as fundamental as an entire year of her life, possibly including a marriage and a child, then the entire foundation of her truth-telling brand crumbles. It's one thing to have secrets, everyone does. It's another to build a public identity on transparency while maintaining what might be the biggest secret of all. Royal historian Marlene Koenig pointed out that the monarchy has survived countless scandals precisely because they eventually came clean. The cover-up is always worse than the crime, she noted in a recent analysis. What damages the institution isn't the human failings of its members, but the perception that they're lying to the public. Consider the implications if the rumors are true. Meghan would have entered the royal family, accepted public funding, undertaken official duties, all while concealing not just a previous marriage, but potentially a child. The legal implications alone would be staggering, but the damage to Harry would be devastating. He's already sacrificed his family relationships, his military connections, his country for someone he believes has been completely honest with him. Every secret has an expiration date. In the digital age, that date arrives faster than ever. What might have stayed buried in the pre-internet era now faces constant threat of exposure. A distant relative seeking attention, a legal clerk with access to old files, even advances in genealogical DNA testing. Any of these could crack open the missing year. Sources familiar with media investigations suggest that major outlets have been sitting on pieces of this story for years, held back by legal concerns and the impossibility of definitive proof. But as one editor noted, the standard of proof is lowering as public interest increases. Eventually, someone will run with what they have. The scenario that palace officials reportedly fear most isn't gradual revelation, but sudden exposure. Imagine a young woman in her late 20s stepping forward with documentation claiming Meghan as her biological mother. Birth certificates, DNA evidence, photographs, irrefutable proof that would rewrite everything we thought we knew about the Duchess. The timing of such a revelation would be catastrophic. It wouldn't just affect Meghan, it would call into question everything Harry has said and done since meeting her. His memoir, their Netflix deal, their public statements about truth and authenticity, all would be recontextualized as either complicity or tragic deception. What's particularly intriguing is how different parties would handle such a revelation. The palace, despite the vindication it might feel, would likely maintain dignified silence. Harry would face an impossible choice between standing by his wife or acknowledging he'd been deceived. And Meghan would face the ultimate test of her survival skills, whether she could spin even this into a story of victimhood and redemption. Whether the missing year contains dark secrets or simply embarrassing choices, its existence reveals something fundamental about how modern royalty operates. The institution that once commanded silence through divine right now struggles to control narratives in an age where everyone has a platform. Looking at the pattern reveals a deeper truth about Meghan's relationship with the monarchy. From the beginning, there was a fundamental incompatibility between an institution built on tradition and transparency and an individual whose success depended on carefully managed revelation. The missing year, whether it hides a marriage, a child, or simply choices that don't fit her narrative, represents this conflict in miniature. What few people realize is that this isn't just about Meghan Markle. It's about how modern institutions handle the collision between public image and private truth. The palace's apparent decision to overlook the missing year rather than investigate it fully suggests a calculation that the risk of exposure was less than the certainty of losing Harry. As media analyst Robert Jobson observed, the tragedy isn't necessarily what happened in 1994 to 1995, but how the secrecy around it has poisoned every subsequent relationship and decision. Trust, once broken by omission, can rarely be fully restored. The missing year has become more than just a gap in a timeline. It's become a symbol of everything skeptics distrust about Meghan's narrative. Every inconsistency, every edited photograph, Every carefully worded statement gets filtered through the lens of, what else is she hiding? Whether Meghan Markle's missing year really contains explosive secrets or simply choices she'd rather forget, one thing remains clear. In an age where every moment is documented, every claim fact-checked, every history scrutinized, the complete absence of information becomes the loudest statement of all. The girl who wanted to be famous, who built her life on being seen, has a year where she apparently vanished completely. And in that disappearance lies a story that might be more revealing than anything she's chosen to share. The silence that has held for nearly 3 decades shows signs of cracking. When it finally breaks, and in the digital age, it's when, not if, we'll learn whether Meghan Markle's fairy tale was built on dreams or deceptions. Either way, the revelation will rewrite not just her story, but the entire narrative of the modern monarchy's greatest crisis.